The Crucible of Redemption. Part 1. The Fall from Grace. Dr. Alistair Finch was a legend within the hallowed halls of St. Augustine's Hospital. His hands, instruments of precision, had mended broken bodies and defied death itself. He was a surgeon of unparalleled skill, a man whose name was whispered with awe and reverence. But beneath the veneer of professional perfection, Alistair carried a secret. A growing dependency on whiskey, a crutch against the weight of his demanding profession, and a personal tragedy he couldn't shake. One stormy night, a young man, Thomas Ashton, was rushed into the emergency ward, his body riddled with injuries from a horrific car crash. Time was a cruel adversary, ticking away with each passing second. Alistair, despite a lingering haze from a hastily consumed dram, knew he was the only one who could save him. He plunged into the operating theater. The familiar scent of antiseptic and the rhythmic beeping of monitors, his only companions. Hours later, Alistair emerged, his face etched with exhaustion, but his eyes holding a glimmer of triumph. He had saved Thomas. But his victory was short-lived. Standing before him, a figure of rigid authority, was Mr. Edgar Thornton, the hospital's chief regulatory officer, a man known for his unwavering adherence to protocol and his icy demeanor. Dr. Finch. Thornton's voice was a sharp, accusatory blade. I require a full report on the procedure. Alistair began to explain, but Thornton cut him short, his nostrils flaring. I detect the unmistakable scent of alcohol on your breath. You performed surgery under the influence. This is a gross violation of hospital policy. Alistair's pleas, his desperate attempts to explain the urgency of the situation, fell on deaf ears. Thornton, a man who saw the world in stark black and white, was unmoved. Alistair was suspended for 2 years, his license revoked, his reputation shattered. The city's celebrated surgeon was reduced to a disgraced outcast. The fall was brutal. Alistair's life spiraled into a vortex of despair and regret. He retreated to a small, dilapidated flat. The once proud surgeon, now a recluse, haunted by the specter of his past. His drinking escalated, a desperate attempt to numb the pain of his disgrace. His former colleagues, once his closest confidants, now avoided him, their eyes filled with pity or judgment. Only Nurse Beatrice, a kind, elderly nurse at St. Augustine's, secretly believed in Alistair's innocence and quietly tried to find evidence to help him, a small act of defiance against the hospital's rigid hierarchy. 2 years crawled by, each day a torment. Alistair, a ghost of his former self, found himself working in a small, run-down clinic in a forgotten corner of the city. His hands, once instruments precision, now trembled slightly, his confidence eroded. He was a shadow, a reminder of what could be lost in a single moment of weakness. One rainy afternoon, a young woman, Emily Thornton, was brought into the clinic, her face pale and her breathing shallow. She was suffering from severe internal hemorrhage, a ticking time bomb within her frail body. Alistair recognized the name instantly. She was Edgar Thornton's daughter. Alistair's heart pounded in his chest. The irony was a cruel twist of fate, a chance for revenge served on a silver platter. He could save her, redeem himself, or he could let her die, a chilling act of retribution. He retreated to his cramped office, the scent of antiseptic replaced by the acrid tang of cheap gin. As Edgar Thornton arrived, his face a mask of terror, Alistair emerged, his eyes bloodshot, a half-empty bottle clutched in his trembling hand. "Mr. Thornton," he slurred, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "I'm drunk. How can I possibly operate?" Thornton's face crumpled, the rigid authority replaced by raw, desperate fear. He begged, pleaded, offered anything, but Alistair remained unmoved, savoring the moment of power reversal. Meanwhile, at St. Augustine's, Dr. Charles Davies, a rival surgeon who secretly envied Alistair's talent, used a scandal to advance his own career, spreading whispers and innuendo to undermine Alistair's reputation further. Lady Eleanor Ashton, Thomas Ashton's wealthy and influential mother, was determined to uncover the truth about her son's accident. She suspected foul play, and Detective Inspector Graham, a cynical but fair detective, began investigating a series of suspicious accidents at St. Augustine's, including Thomas's. Miss Clara Thornton, Edgar Thornton's estranged wife and a renowned psychologist, blamed Edgar for their daughter's fragile emotional state. She knew Edgar's rigidity was a shield against his own insecurities, a fear of failure stemming from a past incident where his strict adherence to rules led to a patient's death. She also suspected that Emily's condition was exacerbated by Edgar's emotional distance. The hospital board, a group of influential individuals, were pressured by Lady Eleanor to investigate the incident, and they were also dealing with internal power struggles. They knew that Thornton's actions, while seemingly justified, had created a public relations nightmare and endangered the hospital's reputation. Alistair, in his drunken haze, was unaware of the intricate web of intrigue surrounding him. He was consumed by the desire for revenge, a burning ember in his heart. But as he looked at Emily's pale face, he couldn't ignore the flicker of humanity within him, the doctor who had sworn an oath to save lives. The question was, would he let his desire for revenge consume him, or would he find a way to redeem himself, even at the cost of his own pride? Part 2, The Unmasking. Alistair, despite the intoxicating haze of gin, felt a cold, hard truth settle within him. He was a surgeon, a healer, and the life before him, even if it was the daughter of his tormentor, was one he couldn't simply extinguish. He locked himself in the operating theater, the sterile environment a stark contrast to the chaos within him. The operation was a grueling test, a battle against shaking hands and the lingering bitterness. He emerged, hours later, the young woman's life saved, but the victory was hollow. Meanwhile, Detective Inspector Graham's investigation was gaining momentum. He had found inconsistencies in Thomas Ashton's accident report, suggesting deliberate tampering. He discovered that Dr. Charles Davies, Alistair's rival, had been suspiciously close to the scene of the accident. Further investigation revealed that Davies had been manipulating patient records, subtly sabotaging Alistair's cases to undermine his reputation. Lady Eleanor Ashton, driven by a mother's grief and suspicion, confronted Edgar Thornton, demanding answers. She suspected that Thornton, in his pursuit of rigid control, had overlooked vital safety protocols at the hospital, contributing to her son's accident. Thornton, shaken by his daughter's near-death experience and Lady Eleanor's accusations, began to question his own actions. Miss Clara Thornton, Emily's mother, used her psychological expertise to help Emily recover from the trauma. During their sessions, Emily revealed that she had overheard conversations between Davies and a hospital administrator, hinting at a cover-up regarding Thomas Ashton's accident. Clara, realizing the gravity of the situation, shared this information with Detective Inspector Graham. The hospital board, feeling the pressure from the investigation and the public outcry, decided to hold an emergency meeting. They summoned both Alistair and Edgar Thornton, demanding explanations. At the meeting, Detective Inspector Graham presented his findings, revealing Davies' sabotage and the inconsistencies in Thomas Ashton's accident report. Lady Eleanor Ashton, her voice trembling with anger and grief, accused Thornton of negligence. Clara Thornton presented Emily's testimony, further implicating Davies and the hospital administrator. Thornton, witnessing the unraveling of his carefully constructed world, finally broke. He confessed to his own insecurities, his fear of failure, and his use of Alistair as a scapegoat. He admitted that his rigid adherence to rules had blinded him to the truth, and that he had allowed Davies to manipulate him. Alistair, witnessing Thornton's confession, felt a strange sense of relief. The burning ember of revenge within him flickered and died. He realized that Thornton was not a monster, but a flawed human, a victim of his own fears. The hospital board, faced with overwhelming evidence, suspended Davies and the hospital administrator and launched a full investigation into the hospital's safety protocols. They offered Alistair a full reinstatement, along with an apology for their hasty judgment. Alistair, however, hesitated. He had seen the dark side of the medical world, the corruption, the ambition, the fear. He realized that he needed to heal not just bodies, but also the system itself. He accepted the reinstatement, but on one condition: that he be given the authority to implement reforms to ensure that the hospital prioritized patient safety and ethical conduct above all else. In the aftermath, Thomas Ashton's accident was reclassified as a deliberate act of sabotage, and Davies was charged with attempted murder. Lady Eleanor Ashton, finally finding closure, established a foundation to support victims of medical negligence. Edgar Thornton, humbled by his experience, resigned from his position as chief regulatory officer, and sought professional help to address his insecurities. He also began to rebuild his relationship with Clara and Emily. Alistair, now a changed man, returned to St. Augustine's, not as a celebrated surgeon, but as a reformer, a guardian of ethical practice. He used his experience to mentor young doctors, emphasizing the importance of compassion and integrity. The story ends with Alistair standing in the operating theater, his hands steady, his eyes filled with newfound sense of purpose. He had faced his demons, confronted his past, and emerged from the Crucible of Redemption a stronger, wiser, and more compassionate man. He had learned that true healing was not just about mending broken bodies, but also about mending broken souls, including his own.